Hi, welcome to my series, which has been called Men of the Future Now. And I'm really fascinated to have this magical conversation with Adolfo Meza, who is an extraordinary entrepreneur and business development conscious thinker. I'm going to call you Adolfo.
That sounds great.
Um, and what we're going to explore today is not only what do men think of the world today, because obviously Adolfo has a view on that, is how do we create our future now? So, Adolfo, just explain a little bit about what your thinking is when I say things like that to you.
Oh, it says, it brings the perspective as to how do I live this particular minute and the future for me personally. And then how do I communicate to others and how do I plan? So the future has a lot of depth into conversation. I think I'd rather you extract more from what we mean by future, but it liberates me from a perspective. It gives one credibility to my experience. So I'm able
Yes.
to take ownership for my age and what that brings. And if I were a book, I would be thicker and more aged and more profound. And I could make arguments as to why my experience is going to get me better perspective about the future. So I feel glad as to where I am now, and I'm capable of looking back and analyzing certain things as to what I would like to do different and so forth.
Yeah, and I think the interesting point here is when I talk about this, creating our future now, it comes from the basis that my feeling is that we're always evaluating the world now on past issues, often that have not gone well, and then sometimes out of our control. So whether the way I see the world as a woman, the way you see the world as a man, there are obviously differences that come together from that. We're different ages. I'm from Great Britain originally, and you're from America, but you have ancestry in different places. You know, all of those things come to this moment now. But if we look at the future, and the future doesn't have to be in 100 years, it could be tomorrow.
Now, now,
Now, it's actually the second. And I always say to people, you know, when people talk about, oh, but then you can't do that, or this is the past, I go, well, the past has just gone.
right, right. I mean, okay. So please let me expand into the fact that I have see, you may say I am a dreamer. I'm not the only one.
I'm not the
Is
only one.
the point is to saying now,
Now,
the the power of now, Edgar Tolle. I mean, there's many books of people trying very hard to say no. See, it's great that you take past experience because that's how we work.
yeah,
Our brain takes the past 21 days of experience and
yeah,
sort of projects a path of, I know exactly what I'm doing. No, you don't. You're a cloud of ether walking around with some sort of consciousness. And we can change if we communicate with each other better.
yes,
We can totally change the perspective, but we have to pause. Earlier, when we started recording this conversation, you and I were having a great back and forth, and you had to literally go, pause,
yeah,
right? You had
yeah,
to, at some point, we have to communicate to each other, stop, this is what I mean, what do you think? This is where we think we're going, this is where I think we should be going.
yeah.
So,
What it is, and I think the prelude to looking at the future is that we're all different. And I have talked a lot about valuing the differences. So valuing the difference between men and women, between situations, our viewpoints, our perspectives. But if we imagine a future without a condition to the past, we're still coming in from a personal point of view, aren't
exactly.
we?
We
And
are, exactly.
and you know, I've been the last year and 2 years I've been in America. I've been talking to men across the world about what is life like for men today. And obviously the in brackets is in situations with women, but with men as well. And every man I've spoken to said, we're quite confused. Now they're not confused about themselves. They're confused about what the hell is going on
Right.
with women. So, you know, and then you can challenge parenting or economics, you know, where do we get our, you know, do we have to go and smash ourselves out onto 100 different platforms in order to market our product? Or do we kind of sit still like Gandhi did and wait for people to come to us? You know, there's a different consciousness around how we see the future and what we project in the future.
But isn't that okay? Go.
Well, I was going to say, tell me what you think, and also what would you be your first thought if you had to create your future now?
My future now is that I am Adolfo Meza, a male, and very, very hard to put into a box with males.
Yes.
So, good luck with trying to define the human condition as these are males, these are females, work together. No, these are humans.
Humans,
These
yeah.
happen to have male genitalia. These ones happen to have female genitalia. Their sexual orientation has nothing to do with the conversation when you're selling product. Please don't bring it into the picture. It's their choice. If they're an adult, if, you know, like there's many conversations.
Yeah.
I've seen you brilliantly bring them up in business conversations because I think most adults want to learn how to be not only better in the boardroom, but also the bedroom. And people go, at that conversation, you go, are you serious? I'm British. And I'm sort of like getting you pale. In America, this is not possible. What's going on with this conversation is that people don't read that much anymore. I don't read that much. I've always liked video input, but I like being read to. Like if people that have read around me have conversations about a book club, like I join in a second. Because the future expands with conversation. And so I think if we value our differences, if we learn as leaders, because leaders have the opportunity, again, to my previous point, to bring perspective of experience. I have it tattooed on my body. Experience is not premeditated, which means we only know what we know because we know it.
Yeah.
Some of it we know, you know, getting punched in the face hurts really bad. Why? Because I got punched in the face one time. I don't like it, right? You only know that either because it's empirical or it's theoretical, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that we really shouldn't be empirical about anymore. Like we know that certain things are bad for our future. We know that certain places were abused of in the past. We know, like this word reparations is coming up in the news right now.
Yeah.
And I think that people need to go yes and no to the concept, right? Like nobody's writing anybody a check. And yes, it's about time we all realize the documents are old.
Yeah.
And that the founding fathers, i.e. humans, right? Because they also were married and had conversations with women. And I think the now has more women in power that have been trained in very good universities and know how to speak very eloquently about the themes. And so who's the boss, right? Like, I don't care if it's a man or a woman at this point. Who read the most books? Who can understand the system better, right? So
as you say, it's all about having a conversation, and we know that people hear words and hold conversations where they don't necessarily hear what other people are really meaning,
right?
Because when the words come out, they have a different interpretation. So that could be because one is in a love state and one is in a fear state, and the words that come together just don't align. It could be because they're from different cultures. I mean, my husband is American, as you know, and we have great fun because I'm always saying words, and he goes, I mean, like the other day, I asked somebody to put something in the boot of the car, and they looked to me and said, "Where?" And I was thinking, why don't they know where the boot of the car is? And of course, in America, it's called a trunk. Now, unless you know that, you could get quite irritated by somebody who's not hearing you. And then we come to an emotional word sequence that we don't understand or we misinterpret. It goes much deeper because we go, it's like women who are told in the boardroom to sort of shut up, to be honest, you know, your idea is not usual. They think, oh my God, I'm stupid. It might just be that the man doesn't want to know at the moment. And he's not saying you're stupid, just saying, no.
I think I love this conversation because I mean, I've been reprimanded for saying dude too much in meetings, and I'm sorry. I'm in California, dude, so deal with it. You know, my customer base likes my language, you know. And so here's the consequence. Yes. But in particular boardrooms, if the male is abusive at shut up, then nah, dude, you can't tell me to shut up, right? And then it's like this argument as to why does this female need to be male? And so now you need training because the reality is, no, it is not appropriate for you to tell either the male or the female that's speaking to shut up. Be a gentleman about it, right? You're in a boardroom. And like, I'm really sad that the UK is losing order, man. Right?
Well, I mean, there is chaos everywhere. And I do believe that the arguments and the chaos are because we're not having conversations about who we are and what we desire. Well, I suppose we are having conversations about what we desire, but there's not a mutual understanding about the future. Now, if there was suddenly a world earthquake or a tsunami, we would all join forces to avoid it or get away from it or rescue people. So why is it that we have to wait for almost a collective natural disaster for us to come together?
I don't understand. I've been asking myself that question since I was a child. My mom and I think we are trying to finally slow down a bit because I go, you know, I'm not a mama's boy. I just really love having a conversation with my mom, who's a poet and a lady who doesn't fear getting her hair too red. You know, I mean, so I'm like, you guys have mommy issues? I've been to therapy enough. My mom's badass, so I don't know how to tell you. I want to still have a conversation with this woman. But the point about the global catastrophe is that we don't have to wait for it. It's happening. People are just don't getting it. That it's not just CO2, right? Correlation does not equal causation. I really don't. I was speaking to you earlier, or to another friend as well, about stereotypes, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm a Latino male with a beard in the border that wants to make millions and doesn't feel that ashamed about cannabis because I have autism and ADHD in my family. I do, however, feel strongly about other drugs, and I don't advocate for the policing of it because I hate this war on drugs thing when, you know, people get to get high on some cultures, but the other people get to murder each other so that you can continue to make it illegal. I think we should look at Portugal. I've gone to the UN twice in my life, and every time I've been there, I want to speak at the podium, you know, because we built this building for us to have a humane conversation about the last time we nuked each other. Okay, we said, whoa.
Don't let's do that again.
We're not doing that again, are we? And even the Russians were like, nah, no. Yeah. We are going to play chess. We laugh at each other, but no more nuclear weapons. So the fact that we're still not getting to the point where, God, rockets are fast, boats are fast, electricity is cheap.
Yeah.
Just stop it, right? The conversation can go deeper. I understand it could go very deep into powers that be, but that's where could we have a conversation about the future if we were to just shut up about the past? Because how much longer are these debts to society going to get charged without us understanding that we live in the same biosphere that might have enough about our BS and it does turn into a global tsunami on its own? It's not going to be pretty. And I don't want to see that for my kids, you know? And so,
No. And I mean, it comes down to this fundamental choice we have, which I wrote about recently on LinkedIn, is that do we want to make choices based on the idea of love or on the idea of fear? You know, when you wake up in the morning, what is your projected day? Even if it's tough, you know, maybe you've got cancer or you're looking after an elderly parent, your kids are crazy, I don't know, whatever it is, the boss is about to fire you, all sorts of horrible things might become, but you can choose to face that with a positive, loving attitude,
right.
or with a fear-based attitude. And, you know, when we come to looking at, as I study gender dynamics, is, you know, are men afraid of women or women afraid of men, or why can't we just love each other? If you do research with CEOs, male CEOs in the boardroom about love in the boardroom, they believe it's about sex, whereas it's actually about loving intention,
Right.
to just choose the positive over the negative.
Right. Yeah. And, you know, it's hard to admit that, I don't know, I don't want to get into a faith-based conversation, you know, because it's, I'm not a religious man, I'm a spiritual one.
Yes.
So I was raised Catholic, right? I'm from Mexico and my family is Italian and Mexican. And so, yes, I was raised Catholic. I've been to Rome a bunch of times. I get it. I took a course, historical critical analysis of the Jesus of Nazareth in college.
Yeah.
So it was like a history class, you know. It was like, the first disclaimer was, this is not, you know, religious. It's about the history period and yada yada. And so I
understand. Yeah.
I appreciated that, because then you can sort of go, oh, cool. All right, let me analyze the perspective of who this guy was and whether I agree with his perspective on spirituality or whatever, or what his message was and I was like, oh, I'm an only child. I'm a male. I'm a this, you know. Okay, let me see this guy's perspective. And then you go look at Buddha and you see that perspective. And so, again, not from a religious point of view, but from a book reader point of view.
Yes.
Right? Because it's like, again, follow a guide towards the light, not a leader towards their end.
Yes, and I think the thing that comes to mind and I agree with you, I was brought up a Catholic as well, so interesting, but is to be openly and willingly informed about what's happened. And it's all about the locus of control, isn't it? Is it inside you or is it external? You know, is the world happening to you or are you happening to the world? And that's the basis of how I come to conversations. Is if I don't have a conversation, it might be a difficult conversation. It might be an argument as such, but I want to shift it into what I call a magical conversation. But that's my choice to do. It doesn't mean to say every conversation I have will be magical, but it's about my identity in that conversation. And that's what I think a lot of people haven't got the handle about. They believe that the external is controlling them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. I was actually going to ask as to how you shifted your perspective. Like, it's whether the world is happening to you or you're happening to the world, right?
Yeah.
And I always come from a perspective, and it's been hard for me to digest, because I have a lot of energy, a lot of it. People have had to deal with my ADHD and my mother saying he does not get Ritalin. And
yes.
And I know my kid has more. And so I don't come from a perspective of judging that. And I really don't come from an apologetic perspective of should we anesthetize the world. I come from a perspective of how do I focus all this energy so that it doesn't invade into other people's channels that maybe don't have so much of it or don't have the bandwidth for it, and that it still becomes conducive to progress rather than something to contain in this corner, you know, because we systematically will not survive as a species if we don't build a better system.
Yeah.
Period. I mean, God, there is so much capital already created on paper quote unquote wealth that's stored like Scrooge McDuck in vaults places in the world, right? That
Yeah.
just because of whatever communication that I
Yeah.
believe, and this is why we're having this conversation, if we were to listen to a little bit more training, specifically what you're suggesting, there's men and women and men that speak like women and women that speak like men.
Yes.
And when we say that, some people get offended.
Yeah.
Because yes, you're being stereotypical, but you have to start from a point of what we understand, like what most of us understand.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is, and it's, there's lots of movements now about, well, we're just human beings. I agree. There's the no boxes movement. There's lots of things, and I agree with that freedom. But if we're to value differences, then we need to know what the differences are, not controlling them. So if you take nature, I'm sitting looking outside, there's loads of trees outside.
Right.
They're all trees, but they're not the same.
Right.
So some are tall, some are willowy, some are thick, some are, some have got silver bark, some not. And there's birds, and all the birds are different. Now, by understanding that, we can see the conversation that nature's having with each other. In fact, nature is very intelligent. It seems to accept differences very easy, even if those differences are that, this animal eats this animal, and
Right.
that's maybe not good for the animal that gets eaten. But there's a general understanding, and we don't really challenge that. And yet we're so challenged as human beings that are different to accept the differences as beautiful and contagious, and be curious. And, even when you're listening to a group of people talking about creating our future now, we have to be open-minded to some of them saying things that we might not agree with.
Exactly, because you know what? Creating the future now does not continue to say terraform the crap out of this planet until we get to that guy's dream come true. No, it means humble yourself a little bit and be okay with the future is better, with a lot of us in teepees being cool with doing, like there's a lot of shift in perspective as to what it means to be sustainable as a species.
Yes.
Not as an economy.
Yes.
And so we really have enough resources to get, and if we were to treat this as a global emergency, we would be having more magical conversations at a global level.
Absolutely. That's what we need to do. And that's what, for everybody who's watching this, that's what we're inviting you to come and share, as we are now, and just the beginning of it, is what is that future? And it's not, I want lots of money in the bank. So, there's something that it's not about.
Right.
It's about the human condition. It's about the community condition. And I don't know what you think, Adolfo, and we're going to kind of come to at the end of this particular conversation, because we will do this again, but my core philosophy is called value creation, and that if I know my own value, I know what I do well, what I don't do well, etc. I give it then to a relationship like yours and mine, or mine and whoever I'm with, and then we create the community. And so when we talk about creating the key word in there is how do we, as men and women of different diversities, see the our? Because a lot of people will say, well, there's you, there's me and you, and then there's them. And somehow them is this awful set of people who are controlling us. Now, if you see the world as our, then it only becomes our because I've put value into it.
Right.
How do you see that? Do you think that this is the shift we need to make?
So I think that conversation is really difficult because geographically, some people do have a group that is controlling them and some people don't.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Right? And so if you're talking about Britain, Australia, America, yes, we have the freedom to say we can boo the president.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's in the Constitution, right? And so it gets to the point where the point of discussion is, can that be emulated elsewhere so that the conversation can come from a perspective of love rather than fear.
Yes.
Right? And so it's really difficult right now because people in quote unquote power in places that are not that open are really challenging that in a way that I just pray that previous revolutions and stand-ups in the street show peaceful resolution. You know, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on in places that, unless you're following the news, you're just sitting in the back seat in America and Britain, you know, and I was watching people being interviewed about Brexit in the UK.
Yeah, and it's torn people apart.
They just want to be it over. They just don't care anymore. You know, and none of them are informed. They just want it over with. And so we're, as humans, as a human condition, leadership really needs to step up and go, look, man, I really don't care if you're like a totalitarian government somewhere. Just
well, I agree, and again, this conversation will be longer and wider. But the challenge I put forward now, though, Adolfo, is if that value creation is that I, as my value, can give it to relationships, can create our community, our world, then there's lots and lots of worlds. So what I mean by that is that the first our world is our local community, maybe, is our family, is Nevada, is California, is America, is the continent. And, you know, it's like, so rather than leaping, as I don't know, what we're saying here is that there are a lot of external controls. But my belief in, it's quite a Buddhist proposition, that the more I can stand for my own value in relationships and in community, there are millions and billions of people in the world who feel like we might feel like that.
Yes.
And that you only need, they reckon that, I don't know whether they get these stats, but you need 11.5% of the world to believe that in order to create a shift. I don't know whether that number is true, but it's a percentage thing.
Yeah, I don't even know the statistics, and I think I agree with you. The point is, at an individual level, right? And this is, again, going back to my childhood, I remember images of Mexico City and stuff like that. We didn't have these smartphones. I'm just trying to remember how values were drilled into you at that time. You know, the 80s were cool. There was something, you know, reminiscent about having a dream about the future. And now as an adult, I'm all like, no, TikTok, I was sold this. The fiber optics are here. Like, I'm an engineer. I'm pretty sure we can do this thing they told us about now. Like, I don't want to wait for it to burn before people go, wait, maybe we should fix it. So if you are good starting every day, and when they ask you, do you need a bag with that? And it's just 2 pieces of cheese, you go, no. And you take your cheese to the car, like the hippie that I am, then maybe we will start some sort of a small process into the our community.
Yes.
I agree with you. You can't just continue to be sitting in the status quo because leadership needs to figure it out. Yes, leadership needs to figure it out. Still please be good in your immediate community, because that will trickle up to whatever's happening in wherever these conversations need to happen. And we all, every base needs to come at it from a place of family and love and immediate community, so that it will evolve into something beautiful.
I agree. And I think on that point, we'll close this conversation, because in my experience, people can watch about 30 minutes and then we don't want them to get tired of this conversation, but we will come back on it. So for now, Adolfo, thank you so much for your input. We're going to put this out online on LinkedIn and Facebook, and we're going to see what kind of response we get and how we can embrace people into this conversation. Beautiful. So for now, I'm going to stop the recording, but stay online. And thank you very much.
Thank you as well.